You know what it's going to require? It's going to require coaches not going out and exploiting a system that's broken and saying, you know what, we could use him, he'd help us, but it's just, I'm not doing that.
Welcome to the Third Down Conversation. I am D Turnipseed. Let's talk about it. Yes, I have another hot topic to discuss. And that topic is college eligibility. It seems like almost daily, some random college athlete is requesting another year of eligibility. The NCAA denies that request, and then the athlete sues the NCAA into saying yes. This is occurring all over the entire landscape of college sports. But for this episode, I'm going to focus on college basketball. A number of programs have decided to sign players from the NBA G League. Baylor, Creighton, Alabama, just to name a few. Now, full transparency, I don't know the players' exact situation at Baylor and Creighton, but I have looked into the Charles Bediako situation at Alabama. In case you're unaware of that situation, a judge in Tuscaloosa County, who is a booster for the University of Alabama, granted Charles Bediako a temporary restraining order against the NCAA, which made Bediako immediately eligible to play in college games. Now, clearly, this judge should have recused himself. And frankly, looks like Alabama is trying to finagle the system. This situation has led to another player by the name of Amari Kelly, who has played in 10 games for the Charlotte Hornets, to seek a temporary restraining order, making him eligible to play immediately. The fans, the media, they are all split on this topic. Nate Oates, who coaches Alabama, are saying that the international players are allowed to play professionally before playing in college. Therefore, the American players should have the same luxury. He states that the NCAA rules are in favor of international players and that those same rules penalize American players. So that begs the question, what is the actual eligibility criteria for the NCAA? And that's what I'm here to explain. The NCAA criteria in regards to eligibility centers on three things: academics, amateurism, and the clock. Now, before I begin, while I am an Auburn fan, I am not here to tear down Alabama. I believe that Alabama has the better basketball team with or without Charles Bediako compared to Auburn. What I am here to do is to explain the NCAA rule in regards to eligibility. Now, with that being said, the first two pieces of this rule is the simplest to explain. So I'm going to start with academics and the clock. The eligibility clock is pretty simple. Athletes have 5 years to play for. And once an athlete enrolls in a college full-time, that clock starts. That clock does not stop. Whether you get redshirted, injured, even if you choose to sit out, the clock does not stop. Yes, you can apply for waivers as far as being injured, or if you had some type of, family emergency or something of that nature, you can request for another year of eligibility, but the clock continues. And again, you've got 5 years to play for. Academic wise, athletes must graduate from high school or something equivalent to high school. They must meet the GPA and the testing requirements to get into said school, and then be on the progress towards completing a degree. So those two things are pretty cut, dry, and they're simple. You've got 5 years to play for, and academically, you must remain eligible due to GPAs and things of that nature. So those first two parts. Where things get tricky is with amateurism, especially when you tie in NIL. But let's just start with the beginning of it. To be eligible, from an amateurism standpoint, an athlete must not be paid to play their sport, not sign a professional contract, not accept prize money beyond actual expense, not have an agent. Now, I know what you're thinking. What about NIL? Remember, NIL is for endorsements, social media posts, appearances, autographs, merchandise, things of that nature. The players are being paid their market value, not for playing or choosing a school. That's the rule for the NCAA. That's how they have it set up. Now, in reality, we all think it's something different. We're not idiots. We can see that it's pay for play. However, how the deals are written up, how they are structured, and how they are paid out, as if it's more so like a endorsement deal. So it's not a contract. It's more of an endorsement deal. That's just how it's written. That's how it's set up. And due to it being legally set up that way, we got to respect that. So when it comes to amateurism, if it's not being paid to play their sport, they can't sign a professional contract, then how can international players play in college basketball because they play on pro teams? The first thing you need to understand about eligibility from an NCAA standpoint is age doesn't matter. They don't care about age. If you look at what I stated about amateurism, it's all pointing towards money. Are you being paid for a service? That's what they're trying to determine, because in their brains, if that's happening, then they're treating you like a pro athlete. The reason why international players can play in the NCAA, it all goes back to the system that's in place for international players and the system that's in place for American players. The U.S., we got a tight system over here. Our players go from high school to college. That's the path. Internationally, many countries don't have school-based sports. Development happens through club teams, academies, and national programs. So in essence, their system of development is different from the American system. Therefore, the NCAA allows international athletes to play in these club systems, compete in these national leagues, and train in academies, as long as they remain amateurs. That is the key. They must remain amateurs. And to remain an amateur, they're not signing a pro contract, they're not receiving a salary, they don't have an agent. Whether you believe that or not, totally up to you. But that is why they are allowed to play. Because the NCAA sees the system that they have in place, and then they see the American system that we have in place, and they can see that they are different. I'm a teacher. And as a teacher, I've been asked, do I treat all students the same? My response, no, I don't. I can't treat them all the same because they're different. The NCAA is doing the exact same thing, recognizing that each system is different. Therefore, each system must be treated differently, with one key thing remaining the same: the athlete remains an amateur. Diving into the Charles Bediako situation, he left the University of Alabama in 2023. He enters the draft. He goes undrafted. He then signs multiple contracts in the NBA. He plays in the G League and decides, I'm sure he was informed of this, but decides to try to come back to Alabama and play for them. Nate Oates has been screaming from the mountaintops that the rules are in favor of international players. And his argument is so flawed because he is omitting the fact that Bediako stayed in the draft past the deadline. That's against the rules. Bediako signed multiple contracts. That's against the rules. Where he was getting a salary. Two things that he did that are against the rules. Not to mention that he decided to leave college. When you look at the European players, I will say again, age does not matter, because Nate Oates brought up age as well with a recent game when they played Texas A&M. They had a player that was like 25, 26. Auburn had just last year Chad Bacon-Nazar, and he was like, well, he just turned 26. The NCAA does not care about age. Age does not determine your eligibility or not at all. But he brought up that situation, but he won't bring up the obvious things that point to why Bediako shouldn't play. And again, amateurs can play with pros. They can be on a pro team. They can practice with pros. They can train with pros. They can do all those things. They just can't be paid, compensated, receive things as pros. And Bediako clearly did that. Then to say that American players are being penalized and that the rules favor the international players is just asinine. Because again, the systems are not the same. It's clubs, it's academies, it's national teams. That's their normal development path. It's not a loophole, as Nate Oates suggests that it is. It's what they have. And come on, like, it's America. There's no way American players are being penalized. And truthfully, I feel for Charles Bediako. Clearly, he got some bad advice to leave Alabama when he did. And he probably wants a do-over. Well, clearly he does. He's back there. But in this situation, it doesn't work that way. And Nate Oates and the University of Alabama claim they have the best interests at heart for Charles Bediako. But I'm not so sure about that. Because for Charles, this is going to be with him for the rest of his life, whether he wins or loses. Alabama and Nate Oates, it's going to be a blip on the radar for them. Because when you really take a step back and look at this situation, is it truly all the NCAA's fault?
Nate Oates himself said, and I quote, "The system is broken." But then Nate Oates says, well, we're just following the law here. Like the law says you have to do this? The law doesn't mandate that you go out and do this.
To close out the show, I ended the last segment by asking, is it truly all the NCAA's fault? We've seen several coaches come out and bash the NCAA system. They call it broken. They call it chaotic. Some say it's worse than the Wild Wild West. But what I have noticed is these same coaches, these same coaches that's complaining, talking about how bad the system is, a lot of them are also exploiting that system. And I'm probably all alone on this island, but I'm 10 toes down. This is not all on the NCAA. I truly believe it's 50-50. 50% is the NCAA's fault. The other 50 is the commissioners of these conferences, coaches, university colleges, the administration. They have blame here as well. Because these coaches come out and blame this program for doing that, and how the NCAA ain't doing this, and this program for doing that, and how the NCAA isn't doing this. And then they turn around and do the exact same thing. They point fingers, but you don't see none of them point thumbs. And when you point thumbs, they point back at you. They blame the system. And then they exploit the system. It's no different than a person taking advantage of the welfare system in America. It's no different at all. Yes, it's broken. We understand that. Yes, it needs to be reformed. We understand that. But does that mean you go and take advantage of it? Where everybody else is doing it? So then you conform? What happened to being leaders of men? These coaches go into these kids' living rooms, sit across from their families, and appear as though they're about integrity. But when it's time to show that you're about integrity, you're not about that life, huh? Penny Hardaway just came out the other day bashing the NCAA. However, who wanted NIL? Who wanted players to be eligible to play when they transferred? Who wanted players to have an unlimited amount of transfers? It wasn't the NCAA. When you look at it, the NCAA does their part. A player asks for another year of eligibility. The NCAA says no. And then what happens? That player, the university, they all gang up with each other. They go find a judge in their county and get the judge to give that player a temporary restraining order, so that player cannot be immediately eligible to play. If I'm the NCAA, I stop going to court. Why go to court when both hands are behind my back when I walk in there? I know I'm not going to win. And then when the case goes down and the player is eligible to play, everyone turns and blames the NCAA. I'm frankly glad that Greg Sankey, who is the SEC commissioner, came out and said the court should uphold the eligibility rules against Charles Bediako. And he cited that the fragment of the sport is in trouble. And that's what I'm speaking to in this very moment. It's the structure of the entire sport. It's in trouble. And I hate that Charles is the center of this. I really do. It's like a 23, 24, extremely tall kid. But if you're going to be a leader of men, that involves telling kids, like, you made a mistake. It was a bad judgment call. And I'm going to help you, but I'm not going to help you the way that you think I'm going to help you. That's what a leader does. A leader doesn't conform. Integrity is choosing your thoughts and actions based on values rather than personal gain. Nate Oates originally said that he was against G League players coming and playing in the NCAA. And then he oddly changed his tune. That's sad. That's unfortunate. This has been the Third Down Conversation. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share the show. I am D Turnipseed. Jesus loves you, and I'm out. Peace.